Well, in both of the readings there, we hear about the power of God, which is a wonderful thing and amazing for us to reflect on. In the Gospel reading, we heard about the power of God that brings resurrection and life. And in Acts, we hear about the power of God coming on the disciples. God's power comes on us as disciples. There is the ministry of Jesus continues in and through us now. So as we think about Mission Sunday, we can think about how the power of God comes on us to fulfill his work in the world now, to share of his good news and to share of his love with those around us. So throughout today, we're going to be hearing about the ways that has been happening over the last year. And here at 9 a.m, Liz is going to come up now. If you'd like to come up, Liz, and share a little bit about, I guess, how the power of God has been working through you and other people around you. And so please come forward and share with us a little bit about your recent trip to Zambia. So where did you go and why?
Well, first
If you could just come forward a bit.
First I fly to Johannesburg and then I pick up my Land Cruiser, very old Land Cruiser, and having fixed it up, I drive about 3,500 kilometres up to Zambia through Botswana. And in order to tell people who maybe have heard of Jesus but maybe have not, and sometimes they hear wrong things about Jesus, I show a film, which is called the Jesus film, in villages. You see here the setup, which is a screen, some speakers, there's a projector, a laptop, and an mixer amplifier. The film is in the local language that the people speak, which is Chichewa. And having seen the film, people are asked, do they want to come forward and give their lives to Jesus and to follow him as their Lord and Saviour? We do this. We normally stay in each village for 3 nights. The first night we talk to the head man and generally socialise, and then the film is shown the second, and sometimes we show a different film on the third night. It's about Jesus, but it's from the point of view of Mary Magdalene, and it's very effective in communities where women are not so highly thought of, not only African societies, but Muslim societies as well.
Now this looks like some very remote areas.
Yes, this is quite, they're remote areas. The tracks are absolutely dreadful, and this year they were even worse. Now this is not from this year. The tracks were much worse this year, and I simply couldn't get out of the cruiser to take a photograph. So they were that bad. But this is one from my previous time, which of course, because of COVID, was 2019. And that was one of the tracks. And unfortunately, you can't take good photographs showing just how awful they are. So, and when I'm in villages, I stay in my tent, and that's the tent, and the Land Cruiser is in front of it. The people who are with me, who are local people from Kateti Church, stay with the village people, and I stay in my tent. I used to stay sometimes in a local hut, but I got very badly bitten one year, and I decided that my tent was a lot better than having the bugs drop on me from the thatch. So
how long does it take you to set up your tent and?
This tent I have to have help with. I used to have a tent which was much smaller. It probably takes about an hour to set up that tent properly and get everything out of my vehicle. And then, of course, it's only 3 nights and then we move on again. I should mention that, in fact, I have a base in Kateti, and I pay for a room there to stay because I don't take everything into the villages with me. So I'm not living in the tent all the time, only when we go to villages, which is normally a 9 to 10 day trip. Any longer, and it's not so bad for me, but for the Africans it's a bit too long, because there's a lot of work in putting the tent up, in doing things. We have to take all the film equipment down every night. Not even the screen can be left up for fear of damage or stealing. So it's every night it goes set up, and every night it has to come down again.
It's a big exercise.
It is a very big exercise, yes. It's a lot of work, a great deal of work. So when I'm there, I tell people from a personal point of view what Jesus has done for me in my life, and encourage them to put their trust in Jesus, and that Jesus' power is much stronger than any witch doctor, because there's a lot of witchcraft in that area. And there's also demonic influence. Now, I'm not certain how many people here have had experience of demonic influence, but it does exist in Melbourne. You just mightn't have come across it. And certainly I haven't either, but other people have. And so sometimes when people come forward for prayer, demons manifest. It's very strange, actually. It was strange to me when I first saw it, that people can literally, it's not an epileptic fit, but it's almost like it. They fall on the ground and they struggle. They often tear at their throat. So that's actually quite tiring. I don't take too much part in that, because I leave it to the local people, because they understand far more than I do. But it is quite tiring. And then sometimes people are asked to come back next morning for prayer as well.
So very strong prayer ministry.
Very strong prayer ministry.
Trusting in the power of God.
Trusting in the power of God. And we don't just go in and then leave people. Mm-hmm. We're always invited to a village. We see the head man, invite him and his family, and then there's always follow-up afterwards. We just don't go in and then leave it. There's always someone there who will help people grow in their faith. And
you've developed relationships over a period of time.
You
know lots of people there.
I know lots of people there, and Bishop John Chipwatanga and others work with me, and in fact I actually help them. Even though without me they can't do what we do, really I'm helping them in mission. And we've planted maybe 35 churches in villages in the years that I've been going. Sadly, during COVID, the meetings were forbidden. And so there are a few villages now that aren't meeting. So work has to be done to build it up again, which has happened here, I think, as well.
What else have we got here?
So here we've got Bibles being given. They're very gratefully received. And this woman, when she came up, she just gave me a hug. A lot of them give me a hug. I discourage the men giving me a hug because it's not really culturally appropriate. But some of them do as well. Some of them do. And they're very grateful for the Bibles. The Bibles are quite expensive and they really can't afford to buy them. If they want Bibles in English, I can buy English Bibles, but mostly in villages it's Chichewa, their local language Bibles that I give them. And when I'm speaking to them, I actually also give them talks on nutrition and sanitation and hygiene. which is sorely needed. Whether they take any notice, I'm not certain, but at least the information is given. So that's also part of it. And I think this is, yes, I've given elbow crutches. I've actually just been asked for another pair. And this year I took a wheelchair. It was supposed to be there in 2020, but because of COVID, it only was this year. And this woman, I've never seen her legs before, but actually she had polio when she was young. And so she walks on her, she used to walk, will still walk from part of the time, on her hands and buttocks, as you see her there. And that's how she moves around, and to move around in other places, she has to be carried. So I asked for a wheelchair in 2019, and I was given one actually in Africa, in South Africa, and I took it to her. She was absolutely thrilled.
Well, so a lot of the healthcare that we take for granted here in Australia
is not available
not
there.
Available,
No, I mean, she'd probably never seen a wheelchair before.
Yeah.
So some of the other things that I do is give sewing classes. I've given hand sewing machines, you know, the old ones where you wind around to sew, because there's no electricity in the villages. So many of the women, I learned, actually can't use them. So now every year we've got sewing classes to teach women properly with 2 tailors or 3 tailors who have to be paid to tell them not only how to sew and make clothes or whatever garments they want, but also how to maintain the machines so they keep on working. So that's being done, and that was this year's class. And one of the other things that I do is education for children, primary, secondary, and also university education. 2 or 3 have graduated. They haven't yet found jobs, but that's the whole purpose of the education, is so that they can support themselves. As in the sewing machines, it's for women, particularly women, although there are a couple of men, to be able to support themselves and to earn money. The people that I'm around are very poor, and even if they have education, jobs are hard to come by. So small businesses are really ideal in that maybe a small amount of money I can give, and then they can maybe have a little business like buying sacks of potatoes and then selling them in the market in small quantities. And the sewing classes, I'm hopeful that women can, or the men, a couple of men, can sew, make their children clothes, they can make things to sell in the market. You know, so being able to support themselves. And so in the education department, these are 2 children who are being educated. There's about 6 or 8 of them, and there's 3 at university. The girl is doing her final exams for primary school this year. So next year, if she does well, she has the opportunity to go to a boarding school, which will cost more money. And the boy is in his second last year of primary school. And they have actually been fortunate enough to have schooling all their schooling life. Many don't start school until they're maybe 10 or 12. But there's no shame to be in primary school when you're 10 or 12, because a lot of people don't get to be able to go to school. Theoretically, primary school is free, theoretically, but they must have uniforms, they must have exercise books, they must have pens, pencils, all those things. And that cannot be afforded, because if you're a poor family and your child has to have a uniform, if you haven't got money, the child can't go to school.
Yeah. Now, Liz, this is very adventurous, and I'm not even sure I'd be able to keep up with you camping in a tent that much and full driving around. It sounds like an amazing adventure that you're able to do. So not all of us might be able to do something so adventurous like this, but I guess what did the Lord place on your heart that kind of, got you going into this in the first place that might encourage us in, how we are living out the Lord's calling on our lives?
Right, well, I'm glad you asked that, because people often say, what gave you the idea? It wasn't my idea, it was God's idea. It was when I went to work as a physiotherapist, voluntary, at the mission hospital, that a patient came, and by a miracle of healing, because it was speech therapy she needed, and I'm a physiotherapist, not a speech therapist, I found out there was a miracle of healing. She started to speak again, and it was her church, which was a Pentecostal church, but a local one, not one that's come in from outside, and they asked me to go and work as a missionary with them, and that's how it started. People can help me do what I do, I suppose, by helping with money, because I use my own money, but I can't do all I do with just my own resources. I always pay my own airfare, but that can be helpful. Prayer for what I do is helpful, because without prayer, I don't think I would be able to continue. Without that strong feeling of the Lord wants me to do this, as long as I have breath in my body and I'm fit and well, that's what I'll be doing. I don't know, actually, you asked me about someone else to take over, and I'm not certain unless you have not only the Spirit of the Lord within you, which makes you want to do what I do, but the background knowledge of how to deal with certain things in Africa, because I'm a one-man band, basically. I don't have anyone as a secretary or as a helper or, yeah. Does that answer?
I think that answers the question very helpfully. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, and I'm sure there'll be lots of follow-up questions to ask of you and find out more, which I'm sure you're willing to answer.
I'm very
ask.
willing to answer, and when I go next year, it'll be late April or possibly early May. I would very much appreciate prayer when I'm going, and even now, because I've got 2 requests that have come in the last week for help, for extra help. So I'll be very grateful.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for sharing with us, and I'd like to spend some time in prayer now as